Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of the Who is Mr Woofer documentary. In the first part we covered the life of Mr Woofer, starting with the first steps in music, then through adolescence and creative music projects, and later the studies and work in Greece before finally deciding to leave for postgraduate studies in the UK. If you haven't seen the first part yet, I'll put a link in the description. So, my initial decision after completing my postgraduate studies was to continue with a PhD at the University of Surrey. The studies would take place part-time because at the same time I was looking for a job in my field in London. But the job search in London turned out to be a much longer process than I had originally imagined, which led me to return to Athens, my hometown. My plan was to continue looking for work online and at the first opportunity return to London to start with a PhD as well. But at the same time I started sending resumes to various music schools in Athens, and quite soon I went through some interviews and was finally accepted to work as a cello teacher in a very established music conservatoire in Athens, and at the same time as a music technology teacher in a well-known technology school. This led to a radical change of plans. I decided not to pursue the dream of doctoral studies, which admittedly in the meantime seemed more and more time-consuming and difficult, especially since I would have to work at the same time. So I decided to continue my music career in Athens. My preparation for the courses at the music technology school made me even more interested in the various forms of sound synthesis. So, with my first money, I started to equip my home studio. My beloved Atari ST was still in use, though mostly for its unique algorithmic composition software and as a crude sound generator. Added to this was another 8-bit computer, a Commodore 64, which in combination with the Messiah cartridge was used as a hybrid synthesizer. Later, I added a Dave Smith Tetra, Waldorf 4-pole, Casio VZ10M, Yamaha TX802, Hawaii K5000R, Korg EX8000, Roland D550, and a Roland JD990 synthesizers. I started working again more intensively with my various creative projects, with the parallel recording of 2 new albums, one with vocals and one with instrumental tracks. My collaboration with various musician friends also led to a series of live concerts in the center of Athens to present my new pieces to the public. I took over the vocals and all the live and pre-programmed synth parts. Nikos and Michalis played rhythm and solo electric guitars, Nikos played the flute, and Alkmini took over the female vocals and live percussion. Soon after, I started creating my first synthy demos. I was very interested in the challenge of trying to create a piece of electronic music entirely with the sounds of a single synthesizer. Those tracks were uploaded to my newly founded Mr Woofer YouTube channel. As a remark, more recently I've revisited the tracks and released them as an album titled Synth Works 1, with new mixing and mastering. that time, I met my future wife, who was then finishing her studies at the University of Piraeus. Shortly after, the financial crisis broke out in Greece, and the search for a better working conditions, plus a certain sense of adventure, led us to the decision to move to Germany, specifically to the city of Frankfurt. When we were settled in our new home, I organized the transport of my cello and my favorite instruments from Athens. In Frankfurt, I continued to work as a music teacher, and at the same time I slowly started to enrich my home studio with new equipment. I finished mixing and mastering the 2 albums I had started preparing while I was still in Athens. They were released shortly after under the titles Pause of Time in 2015 and Metallaxis in 2016. Pause of Time was in an electronic music style with pop elements and vocals, while Metallaxis was more experimental with longer instrumental tracks. These albums helped me establish the aesthetics of electronic music combined with electric instruments such as guitar and electric piano, but also acoustic instruments such as cello, acoustic piano, glockenspiel, and more.
You're not here, but my mind is clear. Millions of seconds away, but I'll be happy one day.
Frankfurt was of special artistic interest to me at the time. My work in music schools led to interesting acquaintances with similarly minded people, and I particularly enjoyed my yearly visits to the well-known international music fair, the Musikmesse. There, I had the opportunity to chat and exchange opinions with representatives of numerous musical instruments manufacturers, and of course, to try the latest synthesizers and music equipment. I also worked on the production of 2 more albums by Mary Dalakou, titled Όλα Αλλάζουν, which was released in 2017, and Vithos, which was released in 2020. In these albums, Mary and I had the opportunity to explore even deeper the paths of lyrical singing and the sounds of many acoustic instruments with an emphasis on the cello, but also special electric tones. In Vithos, we experimented with the sounds of various improvised percussion, but also with natural instruments such as the recorder, which we combined with the sounds of analog synthesizers for a very atmospheric and ambient effect.
Στον Αγίον Τάγια, σε ρημοκλήσια του νερού και στις ψυχής σου τα ναυάγια κοιτάς την πάχνη του καιρού.
Very soon after the release of the first Woofer album, back in 1999, I started experimenting with alternate remixes of the tracks. But this project really took shape in 2018 when the album titled Woofer Revisited was released, which included new remixes of the original album. A special feature of this album was that it included 3 tracks recorded directly from the original Woofer demo tape of 1997. With the help of various processing, interesting soundscapes and unique ambient atmospheres were created.
Oh yeah. Late night. Late night. Late night.
The addition of new synthesizers and effect units in the Frankfurt studio was of course accompanied by the release of new synth demo tracks, which were uploaded to the Mr Woofer YouTube channel and released in 2019 as an album titled Synth Works 2. New synths added at the time were Korg ARP Odyssey Module, Korg MS-20M, Behringer Model D, Kawai K1M, and various interesting analog effects. Now would be an appropriate time to do a small tour of the studio in Frankfurt, or as I usually call it, Studio A. My philosophy is to buy only equipment I actually need and not be a gear hoarder. I try to have as little overlapping as possible with my machines. I'm generally a firm believer that less is more and that a plethora of options can often become overwhelming. So, after a lot of research and studio rearrangements over the years, I ended up with a relatively small setup, which is however functional and reliable, inspires me, and helps me complete my work quickly and efficiently. So when we moved to Frankfurt, I transported most of my musical equipment there, almost emptying the poor home studio in Athens. Only my old Roland A80 MIDI controller and crusty Korg X5 were left behind, along with my Atari ST and Commodore 64 computers. Oh, and some acoustic instruments like the second cello I had, an acoustic guitar, a small glockenspiel, and some more. Due to my profession, however, I spent a good part of the year at my home in Athens on holidays. So at some point, I was bothered by the lack of a small home studio to work in. So I slowly started buying new equipment for the Athens studio, or as I call it, Studio B. I followed my minimalist philosophy here too, and I tried to maintain functionality and ergonomics equivalent to the Frankfurt studio. In addition to the old machines, I added a Behringer Pro 1, a Yamaha TX81Z, a Yamaha TG500, a Kawai K4R, and a number of analog and digital effects. Of course, a new set of speakers, some microphones, and everything else I felt was missing was added to the studio. So I could finally do my music stuff in both countries. 2020, a new album titled Object M5 in a sci-fi atmosphere was released. Here, the electronic, ambient, and almost shoegaze atmospheres were combined with various natural instruments, as well as with a large number of found sounds and environmental recordings, which with the appropriate processing completed the overall effect. During the recording and mixing of the album, I put a lot of emphasis on the creative use of distortion and overdrive to achieve a fuller and warmer sound using various analog signal chains. I should note here that I have adopted a hybrid way of working in the studio. In other words, I happily use software and hardware instruments and effects together. But to achieve the sound I want, I always drive software instruments through an analog chain of processors and effects before recording back on the computer. In recent years, and specifically from 2018 onwards, I discovered a new passion for photography and especially filming. I started with a small Panasonic Lumix GX85 camera and later added a Lumix S5 and a relatively large collection of mostly vintage lenses. I particularly like vintage lenses because they have a very special look, even through their imperfections, which contrasts beautifully with the very high resolution and sharpness of a modern camera. So, at some point I got the idea to make my own music video clips for my tracks. This led to a new ongoing project that I called Ambient Works. In this project, I use the camera to capture a beautiful moment, be it a walk or a trip for example, and I also record the environmental ambient sounds. Then, later in the studio, I process the sounds and I add soundscapes and melodic atmospheres in order to create a complete audio-visual recording of the experience. I would describe it otherwise as an audio-visual diary of life moments and experiences. Entering what I'd called a nostalgic period, a period of reflection, memories and retrospection. Or did I simply get carried away from those retrowave, dreamwave and shoegaze influences that I got lately? Who knows? One thing is for sure, this led to the creation of the latest Mr Woofer album titled Retrospective, which was released in 2022. The album is a tribute to our childhood and teenage years. It's a homage to the 80s and 90s, an anatomy of an era that influenced me, my friends and my whole generation more than any other era. It was a time of innocence and carelessness. And now what? Some say that excessive preoccupation with the past, i.e. nostalgia, can lead to depression, just as too much preoccupation with the future can lead to excessive stress. So I say, let's live in the present and let's make the most out of it. And as this documentary slowly comes to an end, I would like to take this opportunity to update you on some of my future creative plans as Mr. Woofer. After the release of the album Retrospective, I'm currently working on a new collaboration with Mary Dalakou for a brand new album. I'm also producing the new album of my friendly band Gardelix. Regarding personal projects, Ambient Works will be continued and developed even further. I also plan to continue releasing synthy demos when I have new and interesting creative ideas. After all, there are still instruments and effects in my collection that I haven't yet covered thoroughly or even not at all. Last but not least, I have a plan to devote more time on my YouTube channel because I have many new creative ideas and various plans for new videos. More on that soon. So that's it for now. Till the next one.